let's dive straight into it and tell our wonderful audience how you came to be known as the Nil by Mouth foodie.
So this was way back, I think, I don't even know, 2 years ago when lockdown first happened. Me and Amy kind of were just like, oh, I love cooking. Amy's a professional photographer who does all the photos. We just thought, let's set up an account so we don't spam all our friends with like food related photos. Just a little hobby to do. And it grew from there really. It was actually called Deadly X Delish way before the Nibble Mouth Foodie. That was before I even told any of my followers that I can't taste my food. So it was a good maybe 6 months into posting and obviously creating my account and growing my account until I was like, by the way, guys, I've got this condition I can't eat. So it was a bit of a do I, don't I? 'Cause I just didn't know people's kind of how they would view that. And I didn't want to be labeled, but all my friends were like, you know what, it's such a niche, like you're amazing how you can cook and not taste your food, like people need to know. And I just thought, I need to be true to myself. And also, I would hope it actually changed people's perspective on, you can actually cook despite kind of limitations or the disabilities. Like there's a lot of stereotypical kind of views and beliefs that people and we are taught. So that was one of them I wanted to try and kind of break down. And then, yeah, I feel like just before my article went out and I knew it was really going into depth about my story and journey, it just felt right. It had to be called the Nil Mouth Foodie. And it was just something that, I felt kind of changed just the food with like my story and health combined. So yeah, that's what it is today, really.
Amazing. I love hearing the evolution and the behind the scenes that not everyone, knows from following you. But I remember I was following you, it was Deadly X Delish.
Yeah.
So yeah, amazing to see that progression. So talk
Yeah.
to us about how you became so passionate about cooking. Was it something from a young age or something that developed much later?
Definitely a young age, baking with my nan in the kitchen when I was a young little one, and with my sister, and also like my mum. We're very hands-on kind of family, very crafty, very kind of, yeah, just love to get in it. And it's quite a lot of bakers in the family as well. So yeah, it was kind of just something that naturally grew on me. And in secondary school, I started cooking for my mum and dad, and that for on I think like a Tuesday night when they were all working. And it was just like, I'm actually cooking something for my family. At that age, it was like felt really important, and I loved like providing something I can give them, and it gave me that kind of. I think that's when it really hit off of like really passionate about it. And like the world was my oyster, like in the kitchen. I was just, I could cook whatever I wanted. It was just, yeah, a very creative outlet for me, and then it just grew from there really. And it was always something I wanted to dream about doing, like traveling the world, different cuisines, picking up all the little different techniques, then coming back and creating a restaurant or, private dining or something like that. So it's always been a kind of a big kind of lifelong kind of hobby, passion, kind of work related stuff I wanted to do with it.
Amazing. And if you were to kind of put a ratio on it, or what is the balance between how much you cook for yourself and how much you believe it to be a service for others? Because you described there as a young teenager, your family and the purpose you felt for that. With
Yeah.
that, how do you balance the feeling it puts inside of you when you're alone cooking and recipe developing, and then also is it a pressure cooking for others, or is it always out of love for you?
Definitely back then I loved seeing an end product and people enjoying it, but also I just love because I was just new to cooking, and still it just feels like a very like it's never boring because you've got so many different ingredients, so you've got your imagination to do whatever you want with. And I just love, for me, it's like a form of therapy. I go in there, it's just I love being hands-on. I've always loved like creativeness and like thinking, trying to like make things up and what have you. I just find it really exciting and seeing how it comes out. And then obviously it's very lovely to see people's reactions at the ends as well. But I would say more so these days, it would be generally for my own pleasure, really. But
Yeah.
like I say, I do love to cook for people. Like that would be my ultimate thing. If my health was a bit better, to
Mm.
be serving people my food is just, when I did a few pop-ups last year that I hope to eventually do one or two again this year at some point, it was just in my element. Like obviously I was cooking, but then seeing people's reactions and then just being able to share that food with people, and is a bit of me in that dish, you know what I mean? Like just, you know, it's kind of, it was just a lovely experience really doing that. So the balance, I would say, I don't know, maybe 70-50,
Yeah.
but for me, pleasurable, and then, you know, the 50, but it can be obviously stressful if it's like work related
Yeah.
cooking. If I've got brain fog, I'm not feeling well, which is pretty much every day, along with like ADHD with multitasking, it can be quite stressful trying to cook when you are bound to either time or trying to be definitely right. It's not just free flowing, like, I just want to cook Amy some dinner tonight. You know, you've got a different sense of enjoyment there. When it comes to work, it is enjoyment still, but it can be pressure or stress alongside that as well, because I'm, you know, you want to make sure it's right and stuff like that. So
Mm. That's the thing I'm always most fascinated about chefs, because I'm a big fan of Great British Menu. I don't know if you watch it, but
oh yeah, oh it's
that's
so
the
good,
number
isn't
one
it?
British cooking program. Like, forget MasterChef, Great British
Yeah,
Menu. And I
yeah,
wonder, because it's just such a craft, and it's like crazy the amount of genius that goes into each dish. But there's just so much perfection and perfectionism that I'm noticing in the chefs. And I always wonder to myself, you know, you go into something with the intention of, you know, this is my passion, this is my calling, I love food, I love being around all the different flavors and ingredients, and that sense of creativity and empowerment of, you don't, an agency of, oh, you don't know what it's going to turn out like. But then when it
yeah.
becomes a profession from a hobby, I always wonder, you know, does the love ever get sucked out of it, or do you manage to find a way to
Um,
yourself?
for me, I feel like because I'm not also in a commercial kitchen,
Yeah. Mm.
that helps. It's a different, this is something I can physically do around my health conditions, but also I don't, it's still obviously sometimes stressful when, you know, if something's not right, I always need it right, like, do you know what I mean? I don't want to just half-heartedly do something. But when it comes to kitchens, I would imagine, if the reason why I don't is physically it's impossible for me to cook in a kitchen, but that is a very, very stressful, different environment. And I know a lot of chefs who lost their passion because it was just so overwhelming and stressful and long hours and not paid enough and just in a kitchen 12 hours a day. And it's sad because, you know, it's something that you enjoy, but it's kind of pounded out of you eventually.
Yes.
But that's why I feel like even if I could go in a kitchen, I wouldn't. I would choose not to work in a kitchen. It would be, I would private dine or do catering or something that's my own kind of, you know, kind of business, rather than working in a very high end, very perfectionism as well. If you're talking about like Michelin stars, like chopping things at 1 centimeter and like the extreme detail that goes into it, I just don't have the patience
Yeah.
anymore to do anything like that. Some people thrive in it, but I just know a lot of people who, yeah, close by me who I know have kind of stopped like cooking because it's just too much physically and mentally.
Yeah, no, I can't even imagine, honestly. Like, chefs and doctors, I literally am like, whoa,
You guys are like crazy.
the similar disturbing, honestly. You just always
Yeah,
do shift work. And anyways,
yeah.
um, and for you, an art and a science, you know, where does cooking sit for you between art and science?
I would say definitely more art. Baking for me, I love baking, but I just don't, I'm not someone who just wants to perfectionly measure out a certain ingredient, because a lot of baking is very science. You have enough of something to make that rise and enough of this, and you can't just think on the spot and just like chuck everything in as you can with normal like savory food, and you know, even sweet food, but not baking. So but again, there's certain ingredients, especially with me cooking plant-based, that act as a really good technique or kind of two ingredients together that give it a, you know, kind of a different texture like meat or something like that. So I use kind of the science aspect in that way. But it is more of an art really for me. That's why I don't do a lot of baked goods. I can definitely bake good. I need to do like wedding cakes and, you know, like birthday cakes and stuff. But for me, it was quite restrictive, or I like to be free flowing. I like to be a bit wild and just not have any reins on me.
Absolutely. No, I think I've always thought that about baking. It's like I'm a very messy cook and I just enjoy, you know, throwing things in, tasting as I go along. And with baking, it's like you're not really going to taste the like unbaked mix, and then you put it in the oven, and then what? You just can only sample the icing really, or the filling.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be amazing now to just dive into a bit about your journey with your identity. And obviously cooking has been something that has been a running theme throughout the course of your life, but you've also to make it work around your health, and that has, you know, caused quite a lot of adjustments, I guess, to be made, which are very admirable. But be just interesting to hear how you came to learn how it all works for you. So I guess just taking us back straight to the beginning, I know a lot about your story, but it'd be great for our listeners to hear, you know, what you went through and your reflections around it, especially because a lot of the audience are healthcare professionals, and it would be great for, you know, you can critique as you go along. No offense.
Yeah. Sure.
It's a very long and windy road you've been on to get to where you are today.
Yeah, it's going to be quite hard to condense it all, and
Sorry.
but I'll try my best. Basically, it took over 5 hellish years until I managed to get diagnosed with the conditions I have. During those 5 years, I was kind of misdiagnosed, mistreated, and discriminated against. I had anorexia nervosa when I was 15. My gut pain that, you know, was incredibly bad when I got to 18. I've always had issues, but it kind of progressed and progressed. Was then accused of being a return of an eating disorder just because my weight I was a teenager. It's invisible. There's a lot of gender bias, there's a lot of medical bias, and just all of it together just kind of led to being kind of treated as I was a mentally ill patient still. So I wasn't believed or anything like that. And, you know, I got into health-wise really bad states of being severely, you know, emaciated, nearly on the verge of dying and stuff like that. And despite pleading and trying to get referred to a gastroenterologist, it always got refused because I had an eating disorder and it was that. But my GP was the one who kind of kept me in that cycle. He had a very distorted personal opinion of me and the beliefs around it, which kind of stopped anyone looking into anything. And anyway, I was in and out of eating disorder units quite like twice during that 5-year period, force fed, you know, all that horrible stuff. And never really got seen by a gastro, just, you know, a gastro all between those kind of years. The last unit I was in, 2014, during the 6 months treatment, you know, not treatment, but like I was in there for 6 months, I was sectioned, I couldn't leave or whatever. She did see that I definitely didn't have an eating disorder. Like, thankfully, like someone actually like finally was like, no body dysmorphia, no eating disorder, but I have psychotic and deluded beliefs about my health. And I was like, this was probably worse of a accusation, whatever it's called, like a diagnosis to say, than actually an eating disorder. Despite not having any testing to, you know, I can understand someone saying that if I had like, extensive testing and nothing came back, but I had no testing. So for them to be obviously putting that massive thing out there, you know, Anyway, so that was kind of happening throughout the years in significant pain. I was housebound for them 5 years and just trying to force as much food down me if I can, because again, I can't afford to lose any more weight. And it got to finally, after just holding my ground and doing all I could to get the right treatment and not listening to, you know, time and time again, I have an eating disorder, I don't have any bowel problems. Like, I was suicidal for years because of the pain, the hopelessness, not being treated how I should, not seeing a way out of this torture, really. I was in hospitals, like eating disorder units, like force fed. The pain was horrific. No one was looking into my problems. I couldn't see really a light at the end of the tunnel. And attempted quite a few times. So it was a very difficult 5 or so years. Finally got myself to be referred to a specialist bowel hospital. And they were just hoping to refer me to be like dismiss and then continue with a mental approach. But actually they found all these conditions that I have, thankfully. But this was from actually a psychiatrist from the bowel hospital that I saw. He's a brain gut psychiatrist as well, so he specializes in the brain and the gut, and that's, you know, and he also was a specialist eating disorder like psychiatrist as well as everything else. And he was the first person out of 5 years of, you know, not being listened to or whatever to actually believe. And like, it was just the most amazing magical moment, because he literally saved my life, physically and mentally saved my life. He saw a lot of people go through everything that I went through, from misdiagnosis, not being believed, having all these gut issues but looking fine, who have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And he was the one who was like, have you heard of it? Have you looked at it? Blah, 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 blah. And yeah, so then that kind of got my head thinking, actually, all these symptoms list with mine. And that's when I got diagnosed with that. And I also got diagnosed with, obviously, all my gut issues at the hospital at the same time, not the same time, but that year in 2015. Unfortunately, by then, I get to a point where I had to go on the last resort, which was parental nutrition. I do believe if things were treated and looked into way before then, I probably wouldn't be at this point now. I'm not saying I would be able to eat like a normal person, but I really don't think I would be on parental nutrition, like the actual last resort, which is a very severe form of eating, not eating, but severe form, high risk way of getting nutrition. But I am grateful because it's stopped pain. Like, I'm not housebound because of the stomach pain and the gut pain. You know, I've managed to get to a good weight. My weight's not as good just because of the hospital admissions with sepsis and stuff, but I did get to a very healthy weight. My periods came back. My osteoporosis was actually getting better. Like, I had energy. I wasn't in, you know, child clothes. And despite all the risks and complications, it's given back more than it's taken away. So I am very grateful for that kind of treatment. And I lost myself during those 5 years. And this very, very, not quote, but a psychiatrist once said, if you're like, why wouldn't you be crazy if you're in a crazy situation? And it's a very big, like, you know what, what I went through, I couldn't like know myself anymore. Like, I wasn't Loretta, like my family, like I lost who I was. And after finally getting the diagnoses, and even though they're not curable, I became finally getting myself back, because I was finally being treated and listened to and heard, and my conditions were being managed, and I wasn't treated as this mental head case with deluded and psychotic beliefs. So yeah, it was like a big turnaround in, you know, and I was mentally unstable, but it was because of the situation and how I was treated. And I kept saying to people, I'm only depressed or I'm only suicidal because I'm in so much pain and no one's doing anything about it, and I'm being threatened to be force fed and being threatened to go back into eating disorder unit. So it's like, if you took that away, I wouldn't be anymore. And it was true, because once that problem resolved, it took some time because of all the trauma and everything I went through, and also like trying to deal with a incurable condition that's never going to, you're still having to really deal with a lot of issues with chronic illness. That's a whole mental health, issue in general, trying to deal with that. But obviously I became way more kind of myself again. So
yeah.
I kind of went on a tangent there, but I hope that
no, it's so important to share your story, and thank you so much, because I just think for everyone listening, they can gain such valuable insights into resilience and perseverance, but also from the medical professional point of view, just how important it is to listen and be person-centered and not just apply patterns and assumptions to the patient without truly listening to what their presenting complaint is. And I guess what I've taken away from that as a junior doctor is the importance of listening to someone and what they're trying to tell you, because you know your body better than anyone else. And I guess what happened to you is none other than medical gaslighting, being put in a box.
That is the word. I couldn't remember the word I was trying to find, but it is,
It's so disturbing that took how many years of your life away, would you say?
Well, the main severe part of housebound and just utter like living hell was 5 years. I had gut problems from way like 12, which got worse, but it was up, and when I was 18, that when it went bang, and then everything just crazy from there. But the problem is it's invisible, and that really needs to be, when it comes to doctors, that's one thing. Listen to patients, but remember, not illnesses are visible. But also I find that because I'm even now medically complex, and I don't fit inside a textbox, that's where it really needs to be more kind of, I don't know what the word is, kind of changing in doctors' perspectives, really, because read from a textbook, and if it's not in the textbook what you're presenting with, it's like, well, that's mental, or that can't be possible. But if doctors listened with this patient's experiences, and they would have get so much more from that, because I know a lot of patients maybe have the same experiences, but if they speak to other patients that have that experience that's not in the textbooks, that is learning and investigating different, we're very unordinary, we're medically complex, we're not fitted inside a textbook, and that's where it needs to be a bit more open-minded, I think. And you guys are amazing. I can't fault junior doctors, because you're all lively and energetic and curious, but sometimes when you get to certain doctors who have been in, they're a bit more like black and white.
No, I completely get that. And I guess, what I think you're highlighting is the importance of practicing holistically. And when you say, I don't fit in a textbook, you're completely correct. You've got multiple systems that are being affected by your chronic illness, Ehlers-Danlos. And so you need to be under many specialists, and your GP needs to be able to understand that not one specialist is going to be able to look after all the different problems arise. And
unfortunately not.
I know. And unfortunately, with the modern healthcare system, and it's not even just specific to the NHS and the UK, it's very much a problem with Western health, is that we think that everything is siloed off into respiratory and cardiology and gastroenterology. And just like you mentioned, the consultant that saved your life, he was looking at the connection between the gut and the brain, because Hugh knew that you had the most amount of serotonin receptors in your gut, and therefore what you eat massively influences your mood, and then a whole new field of nutritional psychiatry. And you are living proof that both of them completely interact, and you were placed and misdiagnosed in the wrong service, which I can't imagine how scarring that must have been if you're not
frustrating, because I took up so much time in beds for those who really needed it. They put so much effort, the mental health is in crisis in terms of people trying to get referred or going into units, and I've spent so much time and energy on myself who I didn't want to be part of the service, and I didn't need to be. Is just, yeah, I feel like I was meant to see the cracks to be able to try and fill them. And I feel like that's how I try and see my experience when I was in the units, and seeing how things needed to change in a unit, from being obviously a recovering from anorexia. I know how I, obviously how it feels and what have you, but also being in the units when I didn't have that, it was kind of like I was like a observer, and I could really see like where things are going wrong, and you know what I mean. And I could, there was something that I really
researcher. You were like the mole in the service that they didn't
literally, I could honestly say 1,000 things. How like I was even going to try and do. I was still would love to try and do something about it, because it was like I just see what they needed to do to help patients recover in a better, supportive way, and just But yeah, so despite all the crap I've gone through, it's given me a lot of, kind of peeled my eyes open to things that I feel like do need to be changed.
Completely. And no, I just thought of, I don't know if you'll find it funny, but it just popped into my head, but like mystery shoppers, like the market research that shopping like shopping companies hire, it's actually such a bizarre thing that you were compos mentis, you weren't mentally unwell, so you were completely aware of everything going on in the ward, which sounds like a living hell, to be honest.
It was, especially when you're treated as though people think you're lying, so they're not lied to you. Like, I was bullied by patients and staff, and it was, they just see it as like a form of like lying to try not eat, you know what I mean, that kind of, like the first unit I was in, really, with what happened in there, safeguarding and everything, could be shut down, if I'm honest, because it's that like people come out there more mentally unwell than they do when they come in, because it's not the environment that should be to build someone up and to make them better. It was a very toxic environment. But yeah, that should happen. People should go in there and just analyze, because you would get a lot from that. And especially, unfortunately, staff members, there's a few that shouldn't have been there. But no, it was a very eye-opening experience, I've got to say.
Completely. And it's obviously quite a complicated question, but from some of the cracks you did see in the mental health services, what changes do you think would be most appropriate to start off with? Just a couple changes.
Does that mean in the units, or do you mean in general? Like,
it's just the actual communications and interactions you had with staff and how you were treated.
Firstly, I do believe that all staff should have their own mental health assessment, because unfortunately I feel a lot in there, they like control, they've got issues themselves, and that leads to bullying, that leads to not, you know what I mean? It's not everyone. I don't know. No, it's their form of, kind of, I don't know. Another one would be, again, there was no therapy in there. This is not talking to every unit. This is the 3 been in. Therapy wasn't a thing, in terms of there wasn't really much classes. It was more like eat, like build you up and send you on your way. And I know a lot of people who've been in and out. They lose weight, they go back in, build them up, and go out again. There's no form of like getting to the root cause. It's like you need to get to the root cause, like, of what could be triggering or causing these conditions. And there was no talks on nutrition, really. And I feel like if people understood more about nutrition and how food's fuel and how do this, I feel like their relationship with food would be probably a bit different as well. And I feel like dealing with the body changes, like there's just not hardly any support there. It was more just in and out, in and out, in and out all day of eating, snack, then rest for an hour in the living room or what have you. There's quite a few others, just like how dark and gloomy it's in there. I understand that there's limited things you can say wise, but you know, colors, affirmations, soothing music, like just things that more holistically need to go in there. That's basically it. You know, it's a very organized, very like prison-y kind of feel in there. And I feel like there needs to be more holistic things in there to, you know, build people up rather than dampen them down. And the first unit I was in, actually, their motto, not motto, but the way they actually back then need to try and make people kind of recover was to break the anorexia. But because I didn't have anorexia anymore, they broke me. And that was, yeah, horrific, really. And that's by stopping behaviors and stuff like that, or like, but this was not behaviors you thought of. This was like having a hot water bottle while I was eating because my stomach was really bad, so they'll take that away, and like anything that was a coping mechanism,
punishment,
which was fine if it was to do with a unhealthy, you know, kind of coping mechanism, to scraping something on the floor or cutting into small chunks of something. But this was like physically a water bottle or stuff like that. So yeah, they pick and pick. But again, this was, you know, I haven't been in the unit since 2014.
Of course.
Things could have been changed by now. But I do understand, like, it's still probably got lots of things needing to be changed to make it a better environment and a more recovery pro environment than just build you up and send you on your way.
Completely. And I think it's, you know, positive to see, for instance, from my perspective, that there are some units that I've been in recently that are practicing, you know, holistic mental services. I don't know if you saw the cooking project that I was involved in on the psychiatric unit.
Is that on your page, or is that?
I'll send you a few of the photos later, but it's very up your street, and it was really exciting. I did it as my medical elective last year at a hospital in West London in a secure male psychiatric unit. So all the men in there were about 18 to 40, and they'd been sectioned because of psychosis. And it was already, you know, quite, I'd say, a forward-thinking organisation. It's part of central northwest London, so it is a trust with a lot of money. So there are all these different factors that you have to consider, but it's good to look at what a gold standard could look like. And so on this ward, Nile ward, I was working with this amazing lifestyle psychiatry entrepreneur, Matt Waugh, who's a mental health nurse and personal trainer. And he was part of a King's entrepreneurship program and managed to get funding to create a ward gym. And he then did a quality improvement project, which looked at how, when he did strength training, one-on-one practices with some of the inpatients, he was able to get the majority of them down to 40% less violence on the ward. I guess
it is burning off that kind of physical,
because, you know, you go bits, you're already in there for a psychiatric illness, and then it makes you more stir crazy, if you will, because it's a secure unit. You can only go outside to the garden with permission. There's limited places to walk around, and then you're free. And then the big issue was why I wanted to go in there and do a cooking project is because of that sedentary lifestyle and the side effects of psychiatric medications. You get this increase in metabolic health issues like pre-diabetes, weight gain, and heart issues because of the side effects of the drugs. But then the environment isn't conducive to counteracting that. So anyways, that was the project, and it was really lovely to be able to go and cook with the men. And of course there were safeguarding issues and safety issues, like they weren't allowed in the kitchen with me because I was cooking with knives, but I made it in a way that everything was prepared in little kind of stations, but they could still assemble it and be part of the process.
That's really good.
But
it's really nice.
You know, one good pocket of practice, we've got to get, you know, it scaled up so that no one has to go through what you went through and just be sitting there, you know, wasting your golden years, really. It's like, you should be thriving, be given the
Yeah.
opportunity to thrive.
Yeah. I get that you need to be safe and you're in there for a reason, but at the same time,
Or
we're stripping everyone of the things that keep you alive or like just give you a bit of zest, like fresh air, outdoors. And I mean, I get it to a certain degree, and 100% we need to keep people safe and stuff, but somehow it needs to be implemented so you don't get deprived of everything that keeps you kind of sane, because that's what kind of it ends up like. But it is a very fine balance, because I guess everyone's different. When they go into the units, people will be more vulnerable, people, it's quite hard to get a mix. But what you're doing sounds like, amazing stuff, and hopefully other, services might start incorporating that kind of not regimes, but activities into their places.
I know more and more occupational therapists and activity coordinators are working on mental health wards, but once again, if you're only as good as the person, the ward's only as good as the person you hire, which was the point that you spoke to earlier. So we can campaign for that together.
Yeah, I'm happy for that.
Definitely we can use your recipes. And so moving back to the cooking, and obviously you've experienced a lot of issues with your everyday life from being diagnosed with a chronic illness like Ehlers-Danlos. I guess the first thing first would be, can you tell us a bit about what the condition is? Because I realise some people may have not heard of it. Because I'd say it was probably mentioned in one lecture in the whole of medical school, but I did meet a lot of patients weirdly with it, so I chatted to them.
Funnily enough, when I first got diagnosed about don't take me for this, but I think it was like 7 years ago. Hardly anyone knew about it. I would go into hospital or say something and they'd be like, what's that? But now, if I go into hospital and I mention it to even like a nurse or something, they pretty much know about it. So it's definitely out there a bit more now. But it's basically it's a connective tissue disorder, which is genetic. There's lots of different types. I have the hypermobile type. Everyone can be on the different end of the spectrum. Some people can live a very healthy, normal life, being very like ballerina or like gymnastics, like very flexible with no, kind of problems. And you've got the other end of the spectrum with kind of where I probably sit with like the whole intestinal, like doesn't work, like failure, like it basically the connective tissue is what holds your whole body together. So if it's slack and it's a bit like the example I give is like, like how a hairband is very resistant, and it flips back, but our connective tissue of EDS people is like chewing gum. So it's like chewed up chewing gum. So if that's faulty, everywhere in the body has connective tissue, so it can affect pretty much the entire body. It's a multi-systemic condition. It doesn't just affect joints, which is very obviously the commonest thing to know about, but it can affect, your autonomic system. It's done that with me. It's got my bowels and my gut and my stomach and chronic fatigue and, mast cell conditions like, reactions and histamine. They're all very linked conditions. And some people can present it from birth symptom wise, but generally they don't know why. They don't know if it's hormones or what it is, but people, if they're healthy, they could be a normal, healthy, sporty, kind of active child, and you could get how I was and my sister, and I know a lot of people the same as me, got to their late teens, early 20s, and that's when a lot of everything progressed. That's when you started presenting symptoms. But it can take up to like say 40 to even get certain symptoms as well. Like it's a very weird like condition, presents in different forms, different ways, which is hard to again diagnose or put down to what kind of condition you've got. But yeah, mine kind of started late teens. Obviously had gut issues before that, but where other things like POTS and everything like that came along. And it is what I believe is it is a degenerative condition as well, because your connective tissue as you age kind of goes weaker anyway, and then obviously your joints and stuff, so it's not the best condition to have, I've got to say. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. You think it's just one thing, and then it's just one thing after another, and
Mm.
it's quite overwhelming.
No, I can't even imagine because, you know, it's not isolated, so it's even harder to comprehend because everything's connected. And when you try and do something to help one thing, like for instance, the osteoporosis, if you wanted to like do strength training, you don't know the effect it's going to have on, you know, your chronic
Yeah.
fatigue. It's just, it must be really hard to balance all the kind of coping strategies to match each of the systems. And you are just one
Yeah.
body and your brain.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to hear from you a bit about, you know, what are your coping strategies, especially as it's Mental Health Awareness Week. What are,
Mental health wise,
yeah,
sorry.
and
Yeah.
physical health wise, everything.
Physical health.
Like
Okay.
I guess it's all connected as you've so, you know, absolutely
Yeah.
put throughout.
Okay. So physically, I feel like everything's different depending on people's kind of how mobile they are, or something like that. But for me, it's finding things like a way around certain activities. Like if I'm in the kitchen, I would use a wheelie cooking stool. If I'm out, I would use my electric thing with a seat, or just things like that to try and reduce my POTS or to reduce this, my chronic fatigue and stuff like that. I've got to say I'm very not good at balancing resting and doing. I really need to pace better because everything's a bit out the window with that, and burnout is a well-known thing I know of. But when it comes to like the mental side of having a chronic illness, that definitely affects it a lot. Like mentally, you're dealing with a lot. You've got adjustments disorders, trying to adjust to living with chronic illnesses, multiple of them. You've got grief, and you've got your mourning your life before you're unwell, because obviously I wasn't born unwell in that respect. And you've got a condition that's kind of unresearched, or it's not very well known, or there's not very many treatment options, and you have to see so many different specialists. You're having to fight constantly to try and get things managed, and that obviously is quite turmoil. Like it's difficult to live with that kind of incurable unknown, what's happening, doctors scratching your head's complex situation. So it definitely takes a toll on mental health. And also if you're not feeling well, that definitely, like, it's quite subtle, but if I'm feeling not too bad for myself, I'm very more optimistic, and I'm a bit more like get up and go. But obviously if I'm not feeling well, it does, especially if you've hit your threshold, it does get to a point where it's challenging and it's a fight. But for me, mentally, what I help to cope is if I can just do one thing a day that I can really enjoy. It could be a hobby, it could be something that just might like helps like burn the fire in my belly, or something that I can just focus on for that little part of the day that takes my mind off of it. Or it could be cooking, it could be crafts, it could be going out to nature, it could be petting a dog, like it could be anything. It could be like, I don't know, exercise for somebody else, but just that one thing a day. It could be more, but just at least one. I just feel like it just, that really does help, and just kind of, it's dopamine, it's all them kind of things that you need to feel kind of better. But apart from that, mentally, I would say spirituality really, really helped me through a lot of the dark times with myself, and especially to let go of all the crap in the past and stuff. And that could be anything for anyone, but it was more like for me to see a different perspective of life, and like the reasons why I might have gone through all that, or affirmations and just really uplifting quotes, and kind of all that kind of thing just really, really helped me kind of, I guess, deal with everything a bit better. So yeah, I think that's some like kind of.
Absolutely. And I was just gonna, ask a follow-up question there about how do you manage the uncertainty of living with chronic illness? because if one thing changes from the next day, and that doing something you might enjoy would help you, but you're not physically able to do so, how do you manage the uncertainty and
Um,
appointments and the unpredictable nature? Have you managed to kind of, through spirituality or anything like that?
yeah, I would say it is really hard,
Mm,
like really hard in terms of it's very one day I could be not too bad and the next day not. Like you can never know what you're waking up to. And I feel like trying like acceptance is quite a big thing to accept that this is going to be up and down. You're never going to know. And I feel like trying not to worry or to like control it because you can't, and that's a problem. I feel like there needs to be some sort of acceptance, or trying to like remember that this is what it is, and you need to think how you can deal with that in that situation. Like you can control how you react to it. You can't control what's happening to you, but you can control where you react to it. It's difficult, and I must say, like, I don't always can do that to the best. As I can't really do it all the time, but definitely plan A's and plan B's, and just having that kind of go with the flow attitude, I think, and not looking too far ahead, which can be really difficult. But it's just those little things you just need to remind yourself and take you back to the present and just think,
yeah.
this is happening. But again, spirituality is really good, like meditation, if I can quiet my brain, which is very difficult. But, there's a lot of practices out there that definitely obviously can help. Yeah, I would say that's how I try to deal with the uncertainty and stuff like that.
Because that's what I was going to say when you brought it up at the end there about being more present. Does the unpredictability actually allow you to anchor yourself more to the moment and live in the now? Because that's
Yeah.
essentially all you have sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. And that can get me in trouble because sometimes if I'm not feeling, my worst, I'm feeling slightly better than normal. I'm like, right, let's go. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. We need to get all this done before I feel ill. And then it's
Right.
like,
Is that boom
then
and
I burn out anyway. Yeah,
bust?
boom and bust. It's a difficult
Yeah.
one.
Because I mean,
But
chronic fatigue is more taught now, I'd say, in medical education from, being such an undertaught area and so stigmatized. But boom and bust is definitely something that I think is just a very good analogy to make us who aren't going through the experience understand that one day
yeah,
you can present to the doctor and it could be, look at me, I'm, achieving so much, I'm out with my friends, I'm honoring my commitments and my vocation and career. And then the next day, with someone living with chronic illness, you can just completely turn around and be in bed.
yeah,
But
yeah,
because the doctor or the healthcare professional, whoever, hasn't witnessed that, or even friends who think, oh, but I saw you out the other day.
yeah,
I was going to ask
yeah.
you about that because this week is the Mental Health Foundation has made this week for mental health awareness in the UK all about loneliness. I was going to ask you,
Okay, didn't know
that's
that.
that's the theme for this year within the UK. And I was going to ask you, how does that filter into your life living with chronic illness and having something invisible that you have to constantly explain?
I would say it's definitely more out there than it used to be, which I'm very grateful for. I feel like a lot of people like myself are advocating and really seeing what's behind the lens and showing the bad and the good. But I do believe it's quite hard for people to understand because generally people only see me, or even sometimes online hit stories, they just see the good generally, like when I'm actually well enough to do something or well enough to see someone, people see normally people at their best then, which can make them like not understand, like, oh, I saw you the other day, like you said, or like, oh, you walked the other day, or you went here the other day, or and it's kind of a bit hard for people, I think, to understand without actually showing the whole picture. And that can feel really lonely because it's, again, people don't understand the condition and the kind of unpredictableness of it, and how one day it could be really good, one day it could be really bad. And the loneliness, I think, also for me is a complex condition. I'm very complex, and it's like even the doctors sometimes don't know what to do, and it's kind of like the hopeless and the loneliness of like there's not really many people like out there like me, or do you know what I mean? It's like
Mm-hmm.
I can definitely relate to more people now than before because social media has brought more people together with the same conditions. When I'm in my specialist hospitals, like that's when you finally can actually see that you actually meet someone like a patient like you, because without that,
Yeah.
I don't normally see people on PN, or I don't see people with all the complex conditions. And even in general, when it comes to being on well half the time or being pretty much at the house all the time, you know, you're housebound most of the week. That is obviously quite lonely, and it's difficult because you want to go out and you want to do things and you're missing out on things, but actually you're still happen to be, I guess, at home. So it is a lonely conditions, I think, in several ways. Obviously there's misunderstanding, there's being alone, there's being complex to doctors and not knowing many people with similar conditions, I think, to wrap that up without, because I waffled a bit
No,
there.
no, that was so well said. And are there support groups, or do you find that because it's such a unique presentation in the spectrum of Ehlers-Danlos that sometimes support groups, even though you have the same label, you don't have the same lived experience? Like, is it helpful?
There's a lot of, actually not a lot, but there is like pint, which is kind of all bowel related tubes for different reasons, but people on PN. You've also got, like, when I go into the hospitals, that's generally where I see people with EDS presenting with the GI issues that I've got, and that's the only kind of place where I found patients. Like, social media is good as well. There's quite a few people with my conditions that I have come across over the years, so I don't feel as,
I know,
you know.
we're both a huge fan, and I spoke to her before this, of Alexandra Adams.
Yeah,
She
yes,
is,
see, yeah,
no, she's amazing.
yeah, she's
I'm actually
brilliant.
I'm meeting her in person for the first time next week, which I
Oh,
can't.
lovely. Yeah, yeah.
We'll have to do
There's
something.
definitely That'd be cool. That'd be cool. Yeah, there's definitely a few people like myself. I wouldn't say I'm the only one, but when it comes to some people don't, with obviously chronic conditions and complexities, it is difficult to like know someone like locally. Obviously, you've got online, but it's not like you've got that interaction like a friend, if you get what I mean. But it is still nice to be able to communicate and obviously talk to those people online, because you can like obviously share experiences and stories and stuff like that.
And last question before we wrap up. When was the moment that you realized that you wanted to carry on pursuing your passion for food and cooking despite all the new limitations that you had with not being able to eat conventionally? When did you realize, oh, I can still make it work, and have that shift in perspective?
I never stopped. I don't think I never stopped. Like, it never came into my head like I have to stop, like just because I've got all these issues. It was always something that if I'm happy with, if I'm really loving it, like I don't really care. Like, if I love still doing it, and I can obviously still do it quite well, I didn't see any reason to stop. I just found a different way to cook, to be able to still obviously make it taste nice or what have you. Just have to do a few more extra steps and more thinking, and then obviously getting people to taste test as well. So there's definitely ways around it, but with me it was a very slow decline in terms of, you know, I had 5 years of hardly being able to eat, and that time frame I hardly cooked because I was not well at all. With, you know, I was in bed half the time. So I picked it back up in 2016 once I, you know, had the treatment, wasn't PM, just started cooking with my mom, like for my mom and stuff. But it didn't never really faze me. I just feel like I just carried on. And when I wanted to start doing it a bit more seriously, that was in lockdown, but that was actually just a very natural progression. It was just as a hobby, like a little thing to do on the side while we're stuck in lockdown. And then I actually thought, wow, like I could actually make something of it. And that's where I am kind of now.
Wow. And I lied when I said final question, because this what are your plans? I know the future's unpredictable for you and it's something we all need to understand. But what would you like to see happen with your platform and, you know, your massive passion for cooking? What would be your ideal?
Oh, I would say the main ones that are kind of in the pipeline, I would say, which I would think would lead to more things, would be definitely I need to get a book out there.
Oh,
That's my main.
I was literally going to say that. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
You've got,
in the slow process, there's a bit of a difficulty at the moment, but that is something that I really would like to touch upon, because at the moment bits of my story has been told. There's not a lot, and I've still got a hell of a lot to say. So I would like to try and get that into book, in terms of obviously where it comes to advocacy and sharing my experience and the changes that I feel need to be made, etc. Like that would be in that way. Food wise, I would love a cookbook to be out, you know, at some point. I'm still gonna love cooking. I would love to put all my recipes together. I get quite a lot of questions asked about when I'm doing one, and just generally just continuing trying to raise awareness and kind of change people's perspectives, and just to educate and, you know, to do more, I guess, lives with people, and to do a few more talks in kind of the medical field, like just talks. And, you know, I've done one, is it dietetics? That's the word, isn't it? Just talking about my experiences and stuff in that respect, and just trying to make use of what I've went through and make it into a positive, really. And you know, it's quite, I guess, a valuable experiences that I've gone through, despite how crap they are. There's things that I can really make from that experience, and try and obviously change things for other people, and to kind of, I guess, help teach the future generation of whoever that is, med school juniors or whoever, because that's where really the key is, I think, to get into a better treatment and stuff like that.
yeah, and it is exciting. I know a lot of medical schools now that have literally employed experts by experience who come and teach, you know, the lived experience of the illness that you're learning, the disease, like pathophysiology, so you can see it outside of that textbook and actually how it's sent to you when you're working on the job, because, you know, people aren't the textbook illness. So I think you can do so much good, and it must be amazing to think about, you know, the positives and the opportunities. But obviously I can imagine it's balancing it with always putting your health first and not taking on too much.
Too many eggs in a basket, and I get too excited. That's the problem with me. I'm like, oh,
I know.
and it's just
Kylie syndrome, and it's amazing because you've been through so much. You want those like positive moments, but I'm sure, you know, I mean, balance is something I'm massively trying to work on myself, so we don't, you know, burn out and all.
Imagine with a doctor, junior doctors, you guys are just doing a brilliant job, but it's crazy hectic. It must be very difficult to try and get a work-life balance.
You semi want a life as well, funnily enough.
Yeah.
You see, you kind of have to fit that in as well. But thank you so much. It's literally been incredible talking to you tonight.
My pleasure.
It's been so nice getting to know you over the last couple of years, and yeah, just so inspired by your work, and always excited to see what.
Thank you. Well, it's lovely speaking to you, and yeah, definitely have to look at that little cooking activity you did and stuff.
I'll send it to you. Yeah, no, I'd love to scale it up, because I just never thought it would be as successful as it was, just given, you know, how intense and challenging of an environment. And it just shows, don't make assumptions, be open-minded, like what you said, and just try and best serve the people that you've gone into the profession to serve.
Yeah, definitely.
But thank you.
Amazing.
Yeah, you're amazing. All right, take care and have a good.
Thank you. Have a good evening.